Hey folks, it's Ardwulf. Welcome. We have a very special unboxing today of this game, NATO, The Cold War Goes Hot. This is the designer signature edition, brand new from Compass Games, and it is a Bruce Maxwell design. For those who are not in the know on this, this is a redesign of the game that came out in the 1980s from Victory Games, also by Bruce Maxwell, called NATO, The Next War in Europe. I do have an interview with Bruce about the game, which I will try to put a card up right now in the upper corner, so check that out if you're interested in hearing Bruce's thoughts on the redesign. But the TLDR on that is that because Bruce felt it was somewhat rushed, because it was the first or one of the first games that Victory Games did, he was never 100% happy with it. But despite that, it is still a quite well-regarded game. So Bruce had the opportunity with Compass to redo it to his satisfaction, and a very large and significant amount of order of battle research was done to update this to current knowledge. Obviously, in the 1980s, we did not have really good information on what the Soviets may have had in Eastern Europe, and now that information, well, probably not perfect, is much better. So this has been a super highly anticipated game from Compass. I have actually already had a look inside, although you're going to see my brand new unboxing right now, and I will repeat the impressions that I had in my previous walkthrough from a buddy who had already gotten his. So let's open her up. This is in a 2-inch standard Compass Games box, and on the back, we have complexity medium. High medium, sure. I think that's completely reasonable. And I believe the playtime here is, depending on the scenario, obviously, is that you can in principle at least play it in one sitting or a couple of sittings. So it is 2 maps, which is from the 1 map in the original game, but the counters are bigger, the hexes are bigger, and you could still play it in a long sitting or a weekend maybe. So let us open her up. Very excited about this, to say the least. If you'd like to see me clipping the counters, please check out the counter clipping stream from Monday. So, box opens very smoothly. We have 2 6-sided dice of the standard Compass style. We have a little note. Now, I would call this not even, if this wasn't mentioned in the book, okay, but this is very small. I do know that Bruce put a lot of effort into polishing this thing, so I expect it to be a very clean game, and from what I can see so far, this looks like a home run out of Compass. This is a super minor clarification about some of the symbols on the counters. Now we have a pile of cards. And we have some bundled stuff too. So I'm not sure what the collation looked like on this, but it looks great. So we have some player aid cards, and then we have a bundle of stuff which includes additional player aid cards. So let's open up the bundle and see what it looks like. I don't like to cut these things off because I'm afraid I'm going to either cut myself or cut the rulebook. But I guess we can do it in this case since it's pretty tight. All right, so we have a rulebook, which we'll look at in a second, a playbook, which we'll look at in a second, and a bunch of additional player aid cards. So here's another reinforcement schedule. So this player aid card has a bunch of general tables and Zoc effects. The Zoc rules in this thing are quite complicated as Zoc rules go. On this player aid card, we have our CRT and a counterattack table, and then unit summary, NATO alert level, NATO deep interdiction table. And then we have some air stuff on here. We have an airspace chart, Warsaw Pact interception table, NATO interception table, a nuclear strike table. The nuke rules in this, having discussed them with Bruce, are very simple and elegant, and I like them a lot. Here's the air campaign tables, and which table you're using depends on the scenario, which actually makes a ton of sense. Here's a reinforcement card. Warsaw Pact Strategic Surprise Reinforcement Schedule, 1983. Warsaw Pact Strategic Surprise. Okay, so we have 1983 on this side and 1988 on this side. And then we have some repeats of those tables that we just saw. So we do have 2 copies of all of the player aid cards. And then we have NATO reinforcement cards for 1983, 1988, 1983, 1988, 1983, 1988. So there's 2 NATO reinforcement cards. I always really like to see this kind of thing because I think it speeds setup. Well, one player is taking their turn, for example, the other player can be getting the reinforcements ready pretty easily. Now you can do that anyway, but I like it that they did it this way. All right, so we have 2 of these, and it's pretty clear that one of these is intended for the NATO player and the other is intended for the Warsaw Pact player. And then there's a very large TEC on the backside. Now, one thing I did notice is, and you might notice this too, and somebody will probably complain about it, but I don't consider it a big deal, is that the Warsaw Pact sequence is a little bit different from the NATO sequence, and so the title is kind of cut off at the bottom of the Warsaw Pact card. I think that is unfortunate, but it is seriously a who cares type of thing. Okay, Rulebook and Playbook. Both of these are fat, okay? The Rulebook, for one thing, I like to have different covers on the Rulebook versus the Playbook or the game-specific rules or whatever you're calling it. I think it's just easier to pick up, to visually identify it when it's sitting on the table. So that's just me. So Rulebook is 88 pages, actually. It is on I would call it a satin finish stock, but it is quite matte as satin finish stock goes. We have some little bit of veterans summary. It is full color. It is pretty well illustrated. However, I will tell you that this rule book is pretty much all rules, right? There's no scenarios in here. There might be some optional rules, but they're in-line optional rules. So you're getting a pretty fat rule book here, which is why I balk at medium complexity on the back a little bit. For somebody like me, this really is medium complexity, but the length of the rules aside, because the length of the rules is not necessarily an indicator of how complicated the game is. So I think this game is less complicated than an 88-page rulebook would suggest. Let me put it that way. Common game terms. It's a very nice rulebook. Pretty good illustrations. Plenty of examples, which is great. Then when we look at the playbook, we're going to see that there's a Baltap scenario, don't laugh, is a special command created by NATO to manage the battle for Denmark and keep the Soviet Baltic fleet bottled up in the Baltic. Okay, so that's like an actual thing and not just a weird thing. So there's a strategic surprise scenario, an extended build-up scenario, and a war of nerves scenario, which is kind of the grand campaign type of thing. We also get, of course, setups and all that stuff, and we get a complete order of battle in the back too, which is fantastic. I really like it when that kind of thing appears. So here's our formal design notes, of which are quite extensive. Historical unit information on the historical units. Warsaw Pact front composition. And then we have, at the back, we have an extensive bibliography, which is pretty fantastic. That you can actually go look a lot of this stuff up yourself, which is, if you're so inclined, you don't have to. But if you are interested, you can absolutely do that. So credits, game design, Bruce Maxwell, artwork, Bruce Yerian, box art, Bruce Yerian and Brian Miller. So I take that to mean that Bruce Yerian did both the maps and the counters. Not 100% sure on that, because normally those are credited individually, but that's how I interpret it. All right, so we do have 2 maps. They are not mounted maps. So I'm clear on this. Them not being mounted bothers me not in the absolute slightest. This is the kind of game I am going to play under Plexi anyway. So let's have a look at the art style. This is not a graphically elaborate map. However, it is a map that is very close to my personal tastes in wargame maps. It is clear. Each hex, you'll notice the terrain is delineated by hexes. So you're never going to be in a situation where it's not clear what the terrain of the hex is. The various border things in the game, the regional, whatever they are easy to read, which is not the case with some games. And of course, like I said, it is a 2-map game, rather than a 1-map game, which the original was. So, and the stock on this is a kind of a nice, I would call it a satin finish stock. Map feels good. Obviously, I'll play this, and we may be starting this as early as tomorrow, by the way. Which means I got to get it clipped, right? Unless somebody else has a copy clipped already, because like all of my local wargame folks have bought this pretty much. So we also have counters. So very happy with the maps. And like I said, them not being mounted doesn't bother me. I'm going to play a 2-map game under Plexi anyway. So I would just as soon not have to bother with the mounted maps. All right. So the counters are on a pretty thick, but not, it doesn't look like as thick as the stuff from the Compass recent edition of the Korean War. And they are in the shrink wrap, which says to me that they are probably going to pop out of the sheets very easily, if not instantly upon my touching them. So let's open her up and try to be careful with it, because I'd like to not have to clip these things. And this is getting clipped starting today. Oh yeah. These are super touchy. I'm trying to be super careful here, but these feel like they're going to pop right out. It's another thing that will distinguish them from the counters in the Korean War, which were very difficult to get out unless you cut them out. All right. So the colored bands across the top, I believe are, based on the command, or is it the scenario? Because I think they're actually the scenario. So we have Soviets in red. We have Americans here in a very American-ish green. We have the Poles. We have the Czechs. We have the East Germans. And these are all labeled on the counter sheet, which is a nice touch. Not necessary, really, but it's a nice touch. We have the British. We have the Dutch, the Belgians. These are the West Germans. These are more it's not labeled, but this is the same color as the regular Americans, so they're more Americans. We have the French. We have the Danes. We have these gray folks who are more East Germans, and presumably the reds are more Soviets. These are just markers, though. And then we have two full sheets of markers. One of the things that John Kranz, who heads up the Designer Signature Series project at Compass, said that he wanted to do was to improve handling of some of these games, that even if the game itself didn't need any additional work, more markers, better looking markers, better markers would certainly help. And it definitely looks like that has happened here. So we have markers for both the Soviets and and NATO, or I should say Warsaw Pact and NATO, and we have more. These look like artillery strikes, maybe, something like that. Maybe. These appear to be control markers. So the counters miraculously have not blown apart. So we're going to put these in the bottom of the box for security, followed by the maps. One of these days, I'm going to do a video about the order in which you properly put the stuff back in the box, but today is not that day. What we got here is Bruce Maxwell's NATO reimagining, redesigning a 1980s Victory Games classic. Like I said, super highly anticipated. Please check out the interview that I did with Bruce about this game. And so, but great looking game. Bruce is super enthusiastic about it, and that enthusiasm is absolutely contagious. I really like what I have seen of NATO, the Cold War Goes Hot so far, and hopefully you will be seeing some kind of content out of me on the game moving forward in the future. We'll see exactly how I can put that together, but like I said, there's a halfway decent chance we're going to start playing this thing tomorrow. So tomorrow night, one of our local wargaming groups is getting back together for the first time since the pandemic started, so looking forward to that. So thanks very much for watching. If you would like to help support Ardwulf's Lair, please do give the video a thumbs up. Please do subscribe to the channel, and if you want to do some more, then click on any of the links in the video description. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, happy wargaming.